You are looking at the picture of the man who has created massive upheaval in the US as we speak. He today in the early morning hours, Pakistan Standard Time, shot dead two National Guards downtown Washington, close to the White House, and wounded critically at least one more person. He has been identified as an Afghan national. The identification was done by the Department of Homeland Security, and his name is Rahmanullah Lakanwal. This is nearly an unprecedented recent event where a foreign national has been involved in killing American National Guards. This assessment about how the event took place seems to suggest that this was planned and these guys were targeted. Not these particularly two guys who were killed, but the idea that we are going to have an ambush. So it was really an ambush. And this man is wounded as we speak and is in American custody. Of course, it has created a tidal wave of anger and remorse and commiseration all around. Donald Trump, the president of the US, has already spoken with a lot of anger, pain, and has suggested what he's likely to do. Take a listen to what he's saying.
I can report tonight that based on the best available information, the Department of Homeland Security is confident that the suspect in custody is a foreigner who entered our country from Afghanistan, a hellhole on earth.
Now you can sense that Donald Trump is absolutely outraged, as any sensible representative of a government would be. He has been struck in the heart of his heartland, Washington, not very far from where his office is located, which adds more venom to the action that this man perpetrated. The whole world is speaking in sympathy with the US. Messages are pouring in. Other messages you would be hearing in the next couple of hours. The brutality of the attack and the way it was planned speaks of a very violent mindset, but also a very devilish mindset that goes to such details as to pick up the spot, mark the people, and lay an ambush. So it is not just one individual carrying out an attack for whatever trigger he might have in his mind. It is about the planning that went into it. The motives of the attack are not known. Soon enough, we will have more information to share with you on that particular side of these very sad events. We are not in the business of blaming whole nations or whole communities on the basis of one incident, but it has to be contextualized. Pakistan's standard argument has always been that violence of this sort that is left unbridled in swaths of land which are ungoverned is likely to take many different shapes. The age of the person who is identified as the perpetrator of the crime tells you that he is a product in terms of age category of the mindset that prevails in Afghanistan, spearheaded by the Taliban. Then the mindset is that you will make use of the opportunities that are offered to you. You make temporary compromises to serve your interest, but essentially you go back to your violent ways. Now, the American soil has been recently very kind to the Afghans, and Donald Trump has spoken not favorably towards that policy, but that policy was intact. It was envisaged by Biden. Thousands of immigrants were allowed to enter into Afghanistan when Americans withdrew. Others were, through American push, settled across the world. Some were also by some, I do not mean hundreds, but thousands of them were also supposed to be settled in Pakistan. And that policy was spearheaded by the US. So in a way, the US has been facilitating Afghans to settle down after the turbulent events after which Taliban took over. But look at the way that kindness has been repaid. Now that contextualizes the Pakistan argument that when you launch people with this particular kind of a mindset, then it is very difficult to placate them or deal with them sooner or later. Not all of them, and as I said, we are not in the business of blaming communities. Afghans are fine people, provided they are not tainted by the virus of violence. And they are very enterprising. They are in many countries of the world, law-abiding citizens. But if you look at this particular genre of the Afghan ideology that Taliban represent, anybody who's affected by this is unlikely to return the favor that is done to them. And that is something that is going to play into the dynamics of debate about what to do with the Afghans sitting inside the U.S. This is going to go beyond U.S. now. Countries that have given them refuge and have processed their immigration. Germany, for instance, in the heart of Europe, would be reviewing that policy. Some countries are already very xenophobic, but this event is going to trigger a new avalanche of Afghanistan-focused events. You remember how Afghans who were carrying Pakistani identity cards, and some of them had Pakistani passports, were involved in heinous social activities, eve teasing and invading people's privacy in open spaces. So there have been these incidents. So this event, which is very violent and deplorable, is going to trigger a new avalanche of reviewing that policy of accommodating Afghan nationals. The Afghan issue is not just the Afghan issue now. The Afghan issue really has become the Taliban issue. And this throws additional spotlight onto Pakistan's second argument. The second argument was that when you allow this kind of a group to remain in power in a country which has broken down with regard to all governing systems, and which does not control its own territory or wants to make an industry out of violence, then you're playing with fire. So many of the arguments that Pakistan made with regard to how to deal with the Afghans fell on deaf ears. This argument also started to fall on deaf ears many years ago. It had some resonance, but later on, it just lost its pith. And Pakistan continued to, however, make this argument that you need to do something about Afghanistan. And this tells you that this is just one Afghan national. He could be a lone ranger, though considering where he grew up and what his orientation is and where he learns from, probably does not make him look like a lone ranger in terms of its thinking, connectivity with the violence that is part and parcel of Taliban's policy. The argument is that you need to have a global and regional network that does something about Afghanistan under Taliban. And if you do not do that, then they will continue to present a model of violence that radicalizes citizens abroad, and they have citizens all over the world, and that creates an internal threat. So the event may seem like just one event, but it has implications. The UN the report on Afghanistan tells you clearly and squarely how violent this area has become. Who's who of terrorism resides in Afghanistan, and all groups are there, and they are being empowered by the Taliban as well. And the report that was also reiterated by the Denmark representative at the UN Security Council representation on terrorism also tells you how Taliban have been very casual about it. Not just casual, but they have been in a way facilitating these groups. Now imagine if these groups were to come together and also have enormous funding. And that is Pakistan's third point that needs to be remembered, that any government or institution that funds and provides facilitation and finances and invests in this terror central that Taliban's Afghanistan has become would essentially be a patronage chief of global terrorism. And this is where the Indian connection comes in handy. In our STH broadcast, you must have noticed that I have been repeatedly talking about the regional threat that Taliban-India nexus poses to the peace in the region. I have been talking about the global threat that is developing very fast because of the India-Taliban nexus. But because India uses its considerable clout in the global diplomatic circles and tries to tell the world that it is not really about you guys, it really is about Pakistan, and Pakistan is our enemy, and we have the right to encircle it. And some of the diplomatic circles tend to give this argument some informal consideration as well. not openly endorsing it, but not doing much about it either. And Pakistan's argument has always been that whenever India, with its resources and its facilitation, enters into contact with the Taliban, you are looking at a ticking time bomb. So you can only imagine Indian technology, Indian AI expertise, American weapons sitting inside Afghanistan, and all the terrorists of the world sitting there under the supervision of Taliban. What sort of a dirty bomb is in the making? So it is a bomb. It's a dirty bomb, the biggest bomb that the world has seen yet, that is expanding its potential, and it is ticking. I think this is where the debate now has to go, that anybody, any country, any institution, any intel, any official who's in direct contact with this source of global trouble essentially is funding global terror. And here's a fit case to look at India's policy anew. This argument also fuels the argument that was once made by Donald Trump, but then it lost its the relevance or fell on the margins, which is the presence of foreign weapons on Afghan soil. Pakistan has been asking for some sort of a mechanism to get those weapons back. Pakistan has been on the receiving end of those weapons. Many of Pakistan's martyred soldiers and policemen and ordinary citizens fell victim to those weapons. Pakistan never makes any complaint about it. But the argument is out there for Washington to pick it up again, that you need to de-weaponize Afghanistan, and you really need to have a global policy to at least wrest those weapons back from the Taliban. And this is where the argument has to be picked up again. And finally, we are not going to talk about our own issues at this point in time, because the storyline really is coming out of Washington, and we sympathize with whoever is affected by this violence. In this case, the American soldiers have been, National Guard have been killed. America grieves, and we grieve with them. But at the same time, we need to also highlight the fact that hundreds and thousands of our own soldiers, our own policemen, our National Guards, the equivalent of which in Pakistan will be our FC soldiers and Jawans, have lost their lives. Less than 72 hours ago, in the heartland of Pakistan's provincial capital, 3 FC people, the equivalent of National Guards, laid down their lives because 3 terrorists were coming from Afghanistan, funded by the terror groups that India supervises, exploded themselves. They were neutralized, but the price was paid by the dear life and precious blood in Pakistan. So thousands of soldiers and policemen and people of Pakistan have lost their lives because of these weapons, because of this dirty nexus that exists between Delhi and Kabul. And it's about time that we need to look into the real causes of why it is happening. You cannot allow Afghanistan's Taliban to become the hotbed of international intrigue and thuggery and violence. And you cannot allow Delhi to be the funder-in-chief of this terror network. Again, we're not blaming any nation. We're not saying throw all Afghans out. But we are making this argument to highlight the point that when you have a source of trouble identified, people like this guy who killed National Guards are representative of really the symptom of the problem. The cause of the problem lies elsewhere. And finally, we are now in a place where we can again talk to the world and try to tell them why we are sending the Afghan immigrants out, illegal ones, why they cannot be allowed to stay in Pakistan. This is why. This is the reason why. We don't want to turn the grieving that is taking place into America as a window of opportunity for us. But at the same time, the world can be more sympathetic to why Pakistan was pursuing the policy of sending these immigrants back, and why we had to create nearly an ironclad situation on our border. And of course, it is at the cost of some inconvenience, loss of trade revenue and all that. But lives are precious. As the Americans understand, lives are precious. Pakistan will protect the lives of its own citizens, hopes that the world follows into our policy footsteps and sees the real threat where it lies. This person who did this heinous act is just a symptom of the problem. The cause of the problem really lies inside Afghanistan, and those who fund it, in this case, it happens to be none other than Modi's India.